My research on mobilizing privileged allies to address inequalities tackles all the parts of that puzzle. There are many inequalities, many kinds of privilege, and the mobilizing is getting people to take action. It really has to start with my research on people working from the grassroots, and these are brave folks who take on the cause of making change, but not from a position of power, but from a position of passion. They really have passion for what they're doing because they've inhabited inequalities. And I was especially interested in how people do this in the workplace. So how do people address issues of race, gender, sexual identity in the workplace and in ways that it affects their work and their opportunities, and they see the local subtleties in the workplace, so it's different than a social movement. So there are levers they can pull, tactics they can try, allies they can find, and allies is then the key thing. So I started with the grassroots and soon realized that an interlocking piece of the puzzle is how do people who have privilege stand up and rise to change inequality for whatever reason, maybe something in their background, a family member, maybe they just see that democracy is better for everybody if there's more access. So for some people it's personal, for some it's philosophical. We found an organization that was dedicated to helping wealthy people give back in a responsible and very community-oriented way. So it's not like we did a random sample of the whole population and a few of them popped out. I would love to know more about how you sort of find them at large, but I found a collection of folks who were working quite purposively together to be allies. So then the question became, now what do you do? You know, who are you when you're doing this work? How do you go about it? So we had a starting point, which really helped. The stigma associated with wealth was a real surprise to us. We imagined that people who had privilege, especially privilege socioeconomically, in a society that says, hey, if you have merit, you'll get ahead, that they would be sort of bursting with pride at their achievements, willing to help nonetheless, but from a position of being proud of their accomplishments. So it was a surprise to us that they were wrestling with shame. Like, at some level, they knew that systematically the game was set up to give them some advantages. It wasn't instantaneous that there was trust from the community-based folks toward these wealthy allies. It was a long partnership. It was a lot of showing up. Some of the shame that people felt internally about, I have this privilege because I won a game that was rigged toward my winning, was reinforced by people in the community. Who are you? Who do you think you are? And even the shame is like, what is this, a poor little rich kid phenomenon? What is even this shame? Just like, let's get to work. So it takes time. It was a lot of continued showing up and demonstrating seriousness and listening, not talking over others, but actively listening and letting the folks lead. And with time, the trust was built. We were mostly interested in how people make sense of this experience. It wasn't where we were going originally. Originally, I was much more interested in like, okay, what are the tactics? What are the policy proposals? And instead, we uncovered this long process of making sense of wealth, wrestling with shame, partnering with those who've had this experience. Some people even described kind of coming out as wealthy. They might go to community meetings and not reveal it immediately. So after that process of awareness and engagement, they were really ready to be good allies. Then we were interested in what tactics, what issues did they pick? So there's two kinds of issues that I've noticed. There's taxation-based issues. So we have a lot of money, go ahead and tax us. There are groups that literally have banners saying, tax us. You know, put the money back into the commons, that's where it belongs, and do good things with it. Democracy needs that. And there's another group that says, well, taxation happens after there's sharp inequality generated by the market. What if we could back that upstream a little bit and say, what if we paid more equitably? What if there wasn't vast inequality and then we taxed our way toward greater equity? What if we paid a higher floor in wages, maybe a lower ceiling in wages, so that the equity problem was addressed through how we work rather than an aftermarket remedy through taxation or philanthropy? So that cutting edge is really hard to approach. They were still really wrestling with questions about living wages, just wages, fair economies, new business models that weren't based on paying low wages, which then helps stock investors get rich through the market, whereupon they might be taxed and give money away, but really you want to get more to the root cause, like the root cause of why there's inequality.